Newsrooms across the globe are shrinking, budgets are being slashed, jobs have grown scarce, and the hardest hit people in the industry, according to the Pew Research Center, are photojournalists. The Washington-based think tank conducted a study, and it concluded that in the U.S., the ranks of photographers and videographers have been almost cut in half over the past decade or so, from slightly more than 6,000 in the year 2000 to fewer than 3,500 in 2012. Doomsayers are predicting the end of a profession. They're calling photojournalists a dying breed, soon to be replaced with newer, cheaper, omnipresent citizen journalists equipped with smartphones and a broadband connection. Citizen-generated images are a better fit under current shoestring news budgets, but they can, in some cases, leave the news consumer looking at an inferior product. The Listening Post's Nick Muirhead now on the digitally driven crisis in photojournalism.
Photographs have helped to illustrate some of the most important stories over the ages, from the Hindenburg disaster in Germany, 1937, the US's World War II victory at Iwo Jima, 1945, the self-immolating Buddhist monk in South Vietnam, 1963, the famine in Somalia, 1993, 9/11, 2001. But imagine those stories without the images. This will help. On November 14th last year, the French daily Libération ran the paper for the first time in its history without any photographs.
The message was very simple. Look, this is what it is. If you have a newspaper, daily without any photographs, this is what it looks like. And there's obviously something missing because photography is part of information, is news. The way you look at photography or your pictures is also the way you look at news. It's a different form of news. It's a different way of informing people.
I don't think it's said that the art of photojournalism is dying. I think what it illustrated more to me was about the power of photography in whatever guise it takes. Photography should really be seen as the entry point to a story. It provides a visual reference. It draws the reader into that story. And it can provide fantastic context to illustrate the story as a whole.
Sometimes if a certain piece of news happens and there wasn't a picture, it almost feels like it didn't happen. So I get the sense that photojournalism is actually becoming more crucial than ever before.
It's great that big publications value what we do, but if you really value what we do, pay us. Pay us what we're worth. To me, that would be more impressive than a bunch of empty boxes.
Analysts say that there have been more photographs taken in the last 2 years than have ever existed in human history. With that plethora of imagery, professional photography has been reduced in value, especially as big news organizations try to find ways to cut their costs. Theoretically, camera phones in a digital internet era means that anyone can be a photojournalist. But how does the theory work in practice? On May 30th last year, the Chicago Sun-Times fired its entire photography staff, opting instead to train its reporters to take photographs with their iPhones.
There's been some awful examples of the reporters doing stuff with the iPhones.
Rob Hart was one of the photographers who lost his job at the paper. Clearly, he has not been impressed with the reporter iPhone coverage so far. For instance, in November last year, a tornado whipped through the state of Illinois, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. The imagery was powerful. So was the story of the town's high school football team defying a natural disaster to practice for the state semi-final that weekend.
You would think, man, there's going to be some great visuals of the team really coming together, and they still have a field, but a lot of these kids may not have homes to go to. And the photo was just a picture of the back of someone standing on the field, and it was shot by the reporter. It's an afterthought. Whereas, we would have been there. You would have seen what it's like for the star quarterback or the lineman that doesn't have a house to go to. Where is he living? That's the story we would have told, visually. And instead, you just get something that fills that box.
It's not the same if it's taken by a professional, if it's taken by you and me. It's the same thing actually with writing and text. Everybody through the internet can think he is a journalist, but he's not. Because there's a lot of rules in terms of journalism. It's the same thing with photography. I can take a picture. It's not a good photograph. A professional is going to take a picture. It's going to tell me something.
But even when photojournalists are able to produce the image, it doesn't always mean that they're going to get paid. Freelancer Daniel Morel's photographs of the 2010 earthquake in Haiti showed us in front pages across the globe the horrors of that disaster. The images were distributed by photo agencies Agence France Presse and Getty Images, only they were not submitted by Morel, but rather illegally obtained off Twitter, according to a New York jury, which found that the agencies had willfully infringed on Morel's copyright. He was awarded $1.2 million in a landmark ruling that photojournalists hope will curtail the growing number of copyright abuses over the internet.
The problem is there's so much, so much photography now on the internet everywhere. You have to be careful about who it belongs to, who's done that, and you have to be careful of the whole circuit of distribution. Obviously, once it's in the files of a photo agency, it goes all over the world, and then it's like it's a domino effect. Everybody using it without knowing.
I think this case was extremely significant because in a way it pushed for what almost every photographer has been suffering from, which is the copyright infringement. And I'm sure there's been a huge revision among all these agencies regarding precautions taken next time. And it's definitely a bit of a bright news in an otherwise struggling industry.
The key for photojournalists is to find a way to harness the power of the internet instead of losing material and in some cases their jobs to it. If they manage to do that, then this is not the end of photojournalism, just the beginning of a new, lucrative era.
I don't think photojournalism could ever die. That'd be hard to kill. Photojournalism has to be evolving. If you look at the first photograph of a human being from 1838 in Paris, it was a 10-minute exposure. So it took 10 minutes just for this person to show up on the piece of film. And a guy can shoot a picture in Syria and send it around the world, and someone in California can see it and comment on it before that first photograph is even exposed. So, the world we live in is amazing.
But think back and imagine those historic news images captured by an amateur trying their best on a smartphone. That paints a picture of what news, as we've come to see it, would look like without photojournalists.
More Global Village Voices now on what's left of the photojournalism business.
The mistake we make is assuming that an amateur photographer with an iPhone can adequately replace a veteran news photographer who's armed with instincts and training that comes from years of working in tense and dangerous situations. Take a look at the photos that were taken at the Westgate Mall attack in Nairobi last year. Veteran war photographers like Goran Tomasevic and Tyler Hicks went towards the danger and made some incredible images. You can't replace those people and that level of experience.
When departments are just relying on citizen journalism, they're kind of leaving things up to happenstance and chance. The stories that they tell are not as rich and not as complete when they're not accompanied by images that have been thoughtfully, professionally taken.